All right, Caroline Wisherath, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I love you guys. Last video, pre-AP, Caroline asked about the progression of women's rights after they get suffrage. So I'm quite simply going to go by decade because we know that what amendment gives women the right to vote? That's right, the 19th Amendment, and that's going to be in the year 1920. So after 1920, we said a lot of women, first of all, are not really using this. They're scared to, right? They don't know what to do with this. They've never had this responsibility before. So it's not like all of a sudden women are in polling places. But that legacy now is fierce, and you have, again, officially this right to vote. So this is huge. In the 1930s, the biggest thing I would say, besides, of course, knowing lots of female visionaries like Dorothea Lange and Mary McLeod Bethune and Frances Perkins, is the fact that we recognize you must have a two-income household for maximum financial security. And we said a lot of times social changes don't occur because people all of a sudden realize they're the right thing. They occur out of necessity. We said that as far as women going back to work, we learned that lesson from the Great Depression. As far as the threats of having a one-income household, we talked about this with civil rights, the South realizing that they need to have more money and have people invest in their cities in places like Birmingham and Montgomery and can't afford to look so terrible on TV because they're not getting jobs and they're not getting tourists. So keep that in mind with the 1930s for women. 1940s for women, the big thing, of course, is going to be, I don't know where to look here. Like I'm looking over here, I'm looking here. Anyways, the big thing is going to be World War II. And we know Rosie the Riveter is going to be Asian, Black, Latina. She's from everywhere. She's all across the United States. Women are doing everything from working in hospitals to being in the waves and the WACs and the WASPs. There's so much going on, so much involvement. And then it's so weird, after all this involvement and all of this great sense of responsibility and value, as we said, and understanding your own self-value and all these other things, then women are bounced out of these jobs when you have those people, 12 million people come home after World War II. But we said, interestingly enough, women do not leave the workforce. And then we have this lull, this time period in the 1950s where women are not going to be working. We said they are very cut off distance in suburbia. We looked at the girdle commercials and we looked at how dysfunctional and suffocating that is a time for women in a big way. And not just for women, but for lots of different minorities and people in the 1950s in America. And it's this boiling underneath the surface, as we talked about in the 1950s with lots of things, music with Elvis, literature with the Beat poets and Jack Kerouac and Sylvia Plath, film with James Dean. This is also going on for women, and a big source that we know who's going to write about this come 1963 is Betty Friedan with The Feminine Mystique. He's got this. And she is realizing that her discontent, her feeling of disconnectedness, her feeling of, not loving just being in her home is shared by other women, and she's going to write about these experiences in The Feminine Mystique, and then this opens up the beginning of the women's movement in the 1960s and 1970s. You might see it as the women's liberation movement, you might see it as the feminist movement, and you might just see it as the women's lib movement or women's movement. But this is going to really be in the late 60s and the early 70s. And we know all kinds of action here. Betty Friedan is going to be instrumental with starting now. You have all different people like Diane Nash, other women who are involved in civil rights. A lot of them transfer over and help with this movement and become a part of it as well. But we said that is a big shortcoming, and that is ultimately going to be a death knell for this movement. Lots of people see it as a lot of middle-class white women and not necessarily inclusive for everybody. So we have Gloria Steinem at this time. We know that she is going to go undercover as a Playboy bunny and expose and then get a big name as a journalist, and she surges forward. She's going to start Ms. Magazine. We know on the table here is ERA, and an amazing older Alice Paul is still fighting for this, the Equal Rights Amendment, and it does not get passed. You have people like Phyllis Schlafly who are fighting against equal rights for women at this time, against ERA, saying like, what if we have a draft? That would mean women would have to go. What about sharing bathrooms? All this stuff, and so much cooking at this time, so much going on for the rights of women. This is hurting my neck, but no, hold on, we'll go back. But it's a really big time for women's lib, and it's a really big time for this movement in general. And of course, there's the famous bra burning going on, and the Miss America pageant, I believe that was in '68. So you have lots of this growing and growing over time, and there's just a general sense of like, hey, wait a second, we're remembering those seeds that were planted in the 1940s. We're remembering what was going on in World War II, and enough's enough. We're not going to live like this anymore. And again, women were deeply unhappy, many of them, with the restrictions that were placed upon them, not being able to go into law, not being able to go into medicine. And again, so many women, if you think about a movie like Mona Lisa's Smile, having a college education and then not being able to use it. So this does fizzle out towards the end of the 1970s because, again, it was not intersectional. It did not include everybody, and that has to be the future, and that has to be, as we talked about with the most recent Women's March, a big aim of this march, and we could argue whether it totally met it or not, was that it had to be intersectional. The planning committee had to have people from all different walks of life, all different ethnicities, because we succeed at this together or we just don't succeed. It's quite that simple. So then come the 1980s, we know we have big moves going on. Sandra Day O'Connor is a Supreme Court Justice, Geraldine Ferraro running on the presidential ticket. We talked about Murphy Brown as a TV show with, of course, Diane English, Narden shout out. So you have, this continue for women, and we talked about like how women wear shoulder pads in the 1980s, kind of mimicking men in these spaces they previously weren't in, thinking that the idea of power is masculine. All these interesting ideas going on, and I still want you guys to write that thesis about undergarments and other things, because those are changing over time, right? Things are literally loosening up for women if we look at corsets and so on over time. It's really interesting. People are gonna be like, what are you doing making a video at 9:20 at night talking about corsets? You know what? This is what I do. I'm a teacher. So 1990s, again, something we discussed in class. It's really interesting to look at what happened with Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky in the 1990s in the midst of what's going on in our country right now with the Me Too movement. And again, always gauging how far have we come, how much further do we have to go. One more thing that I did not mention, and that's going to be Roe v. Wade. I believe the year is 1973. And again, the ways the women's movement is going to pair up with abortion rights over time and how people are going to feel, that is paired with feminism. Some people are not, and where the discussion goes, how that interacts with the new right and conservatism under Reagan. But Roe v. Wade, of course, in 1973, saying this is a woman's right, constitutional right to privacy, and when you force her to have the child, you are in essence, when you stop her from having an abortion, you are in essence forcing her to have this child. So that is going to be the statement coming from Roe v. Wade in 1973. I'm trying to think. So that's 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s we touched on a teeny bit, and then really 2000s we continue to engage in this world. We talked about the Lilly Ledbetter Act when we discussed things earlier, when we first talked about women's rights coming from Seneca Falls. We continue to kind of pass this baton. So even though, Miss Shannon, it's not going to be completely, oh my God, I called you Shannon. Caroline, I'm so sorry. This is why I shouldn't make videos this late at night. It's not going to be like a classification of a movement in the 80s and 90s. I really think we now are in a big third wave of that feminist movement at this time. And it's because of those seeds that were planted previously. And we can go all the way back. Oh my God, Sacagawea, forget Seneca Falls. I go way, way back, way, way back. And there's so much there for us to, again, carry on. With that, you people, I am going to bed. I'm not going to bed right now, but I wish you the best of luck. You guys are going to be just absolutely amazing, amazing, amazing tomorrow. Trust yourself. Trust all the work you've done all year. And you, again, deserve this for you. Leave it all on the page. Leave it all in the exam room. You've got this.